Good day. Hello to all. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt show. My name is James Fauntleroy. I am your host as always. It's so good to see every single one of you joining me here. Yes, today I am doing the next part of Dirty Truths by Michael Parenti. We are doing chapter 1, part 6. This actually starts on page number 73 of this book. Just to let you guys know, yes, I am available on all major podcast platforms like Anchor, Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, so you can follow me there. Also, make sure to follow me also on the Revolutionary Blackout Network, which I am also a part of. Please make sure to follow me on there as well. Thanks to all the patrons on Patreon, as well as Coffee. For without you guys, I would not be able to do this, which I am really enjoying doing these readings. So I hope to continue to keep doing them even further. I just want to give a shout out to Rob Durden of Political Fight Club for he was reading Black Shirts and Reds by Michael Parenti on his channel. So if you guys haven't got a chance to check him out on his channel, please make sure to check out his channel. He actually did the entire reading of Black Shirts and Reds from cover to cover. I highly recommend that you guys listen in on that. That was an awesome thing. If you guys like what Michael Parenti has been saying, he's reading a new book now, so you guys can jump on that as well. But it's good to be able to just hear this, while you may be doing things around the house, or you could be driving somewhere, or you could just be chilling out, and just vibing, and you can listen to this. But it also is really good to get some of these um, different types of leftist people who are thought leaders, ones who are basically the observers of what goes on within our nation. So please make sure to give him also a follow, as well as take a look at that as well. So, of course, as always, all right, Dirty Truths, Michael Parenti, we're reading it today. This one is actually quite interesting because this actually goes into about Gaddafi. And the title of this is called The Terrorism Hype. So this is the title, so that you guys can see. And so this is going to be a very interesting read. It's not actually very long. It's actually relatively short. And I also am trying to get this reading done as quickly as possible because we have guys working on the roof in our condos. Horrible timing, I know. I'm pretty irritated about it, but that's what the the board deemed determined. So, and I don't have a say because I'm a renter, but I'm trying to get it done while they're on their lunch break. So hopefully their lunch break is at least another 45 minutes, so we can get this through, so that you won't hear a whole bunch of banging. But outside of that, let me get myself a sip of tea, as always. Maybe sometime I should do like a really more darker motif with some like blue or green lighting or something like that, just to set the mood. But that's all for later. Whenever I get a couple extra bucks, I can do that. Anyway, so terrorism hype and dirty truths. the, U- the United States national security state and its faithful lackeys and the news media designate a terrorist those dissident political or nationalist groups that operate against Western governments or against the established interests of global operations. Just 1 second, excuse me. While applied to the lone gunman or the small circle of conspirators who plant a bomb, terrorism is never used to describe an act of massive repression and destruction perpetuated against the whole populations by the US forces or by the armies of CIA supported client states. A bomb planted by a pub member of the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, is a terrorist act, but not the US aerial bombing of whole working class neighborhoods in Panama City, or the US bombing of civilian populations in Baghdad, or the burning of 660 villages in Guatemala by US supported forces. or the roundups and mass executions of democratic supporters in Chile, Indonesia, Afghanistan, South Yemen, and other countries. State supported right wing terrorism, as practiced by United States clients, is never defined as terrorism, though it is conducted on a far greater scale than the isolated bombings carried out by any Basque, Arab, or IRA group. Also, left uncounted is the massive terrorism perpetuated by US supported guerrilla mercenaries as in Angola, Mozambique, Nicaragua, and several other countries, in which entire countrysides are devastated and massive numbers of people slaughtered. The larger terrorism. As cities of US interventionism have pointed out, what is reported as terrorism in the press is retail terrorism. What goes unnoted as wholesale terrorism, as massive US backed state supported kind. By any measure other than the peculiar one used by Washington policymakers and propagandists, the US national security state is the greatest purveyor of terrorism in the world today and has been for some time. Tallying one tallying only the death toll inflicted by US armed forces or US backed surrogate forces around the world, the estimates are as follows: 3 million in Vietnam, 1 million in Cambodia, 1 million in Mozambique, 500,000 to 1 million in Indonesia, 600,000 in Angola, 300,000 in Laos, 250,000 in East Timor, 200,000 in Iraq, 200,000 in Afghanistan, 150,000 in Guatemala, 100,000 in Nicaragua, 90,000 in El Salvador, and tens of thousands in Chile, Argentina, Zaire, Iran under the Shah, Colombia, Bolivia, Brazil, Panama, Somalia, South Yemen, Western Sahara, and other countries. Footnote reads: for details and documentation of the U.S. imposed post war Holocaust in the Third World, see my book, The Sword and the Dollar. That's from 1989. Edward Herman's book, The Real Terror Network. That was in 1982. And William Blum's Killing Hope, U.S. Military and CIA Intervention Since World War II. That was from 1995. Back to the paragraph. Against the blowing up of a building or an airliner, how do we measure the US sponsored terrorism? To be sure, we must not dismiss or make light of individual acts of terror. Yet we might wonder why they are the only ones that warrant publicity and condemnation. The wholesale terrorism of aerial massacres, death squads, mass executions, torture, and intimidation orchestrated by the US national security state either goes unreported altogether or is represented as the legitimate activity of governments defending themselves from insurgencies and terrorists. Even on those rare occasions when atrocities are reported, the corporate owned media never make the link between such horrific events and policies of intervention and repression directed from Washington. The question is never asked: why do successive US governments support the kind of elements that are capable of committing such acts? What interests are bolstered and what interests are retarded when the whole villages of men, women, and children are slaughtered by military that is supported and trained by US government? Those isolated acts of violence the press defines as terrorist are subject to a highly slanted mode of reportage. Consider that the White House charged Libya with orchestrating the destruction of Pan Am Flight 103 in 1988 over Lockerbie, Scotland, an incident resulting in the loss of 270 lives. In fact, there were strong signs pointing to terrorist groups in Syria and Iran. No matter Washington wanted to target Libya. Two Libyan intelligence agents were named and the US media having committed the act of terrorism. In fact, all we really knew about them was that they were Libyan airline employees, yet they were repeatedly identified as secret agents. The New York Times ran an editorial demanding that they be brought to justice and that the Libyan government, particularly its leader, Muammar el Gaddafi, be held accountable. The Libyans understandably refused to hand over the two men because no evidence was ever presented linking any Libyan to the Pan Am bombing. Everybody, here come the assassins. Libya has been targeted on other occasions. In 1981, U.S. planes attacked that country and shot down two Libyan training jets. In 1985, U.S. planes bombed two cities, killing a number of people, including Gaddafi's young daughter. They were aiming for Gaddafi. Neither of those terrorist attacks were condemned in the U.S. press. So they literally killed Gaddafi's daughter. Let's ask this. If that were here in the United States, there will be a war started. Let any of that happen to any other Western nation, and a war would have been started. The head of state's family get killed, and the United States is the one that does it. And yet they want to call people like Gaddafi a terrorist? Wild. Pure projection. Interesting. An incident of terrorism hype that had the US press hot and bothered for the better part of 2 months occurred in late 1981 when the US government announced that Libyan team of assassins, assisted by East German terror experts under orders from Colonel Gaddafi, had entered the United States. Supposedly, armed with surface to air missiles, they were intending to kill President Reagan and turn on so top officials, including the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. The media response to this fantastic tale was to treat it as solid fact. On ABC TV Evening News, November 26, 1981, Frank Reynolds stated that it was known that Libyan agents were in this country, quote, in this country for the purpose of assassinating the highest officials in US government, end quote. CBS anchor Dan Rather announced on December 4th, quote, a squad of terrorists infiltrated the United States on a mission to kill the president and his top aides. It sounds like the stuff of a suspense novel, but American security officials tonight are taking the word of an informant seriously, end quote. That same evening, NBC began its report by asking, quote, is it true? Then promptly treated it as if it were. An NBC correspondent asked President Reagan if he was, quote, worried about the assassination plot. Quote, yes, of course, said Reagan. The camera cut to Secret Service men leaping out of cars and racing around the president's limousine, an image which itself suggested that the president was under imminent attack. ABC's Nightline, back in December 4th, 1981, presented a special on the Libyan assassination plot featuring Ray Klein, a former deputy director of the CIA, who claimed the Libyan terrorist groups were organized basically and initially by the Soviet Union, and that our open society made for our officials sitting ducks because quote we have been busy handcuffing the CIA and FBI for a number of years, and only President Reagan is trying to turn them loose a bit to deal with these threats, end quote. For the sake of balance, the right wing Klein was joined by right wing journalist Arnaud de Borgave, introduced as a quote unquote terrorism expert. He too assured viewers that the Libyans were working for the Soviet Union and that Gaddafi, whom Borchgrave claimed to have interviewed, quote unquote, 5 times in my life, was a quote unquote pathological liar. There's a lot of quotes in this. For added political diversity, the panel included the right winger Marvin Zonis, a Likud, a Likud cheerleader described as a quote unquote Mideast expert, who said that, quote, Colonel Gaddafi had a conversation with another leader of a Middle Eastern country in which he discussed very coolly in a rational way how he intended to go about assassinating President Reagan, end quote. No one questioned Zonis about his source or asked about how it was possible that a leader of one nation would openly discuss his plans to assassinate the US president with the leader of another nation who might impart this information to others. No one appeared on the show to inject a cautionary note or question the remarkable statements made by these three cold warriors. The networks did their share to keep the White House conspiracy fantasy alive, running no less than 24 evening news reports about the hit teams in 1 month. Viewers were told that there were 3, 5, 10, 12, or 13 hitmen, depending on what network and what evening you watched. The assassins entered the US from Canada, that was from CBS, sorry, ABC and CBS, from Mexico, CBS, and not from Mexico, ABC. The hit squad was composed of 3 Libyans, said by ABC and NBC, 3 Iranians, CBS and NBC, 2 Iranians, ABC, and 3 Syrians, NBC. All three networks agreed that there was one Palestinian, one Lebanese, and one East German, and a partridge in a pear tree. No, I'm just kidding. That last part was added by me as a joke. But yeah, they were adding all this in there. By the third week, there was said to be 2 hit squads. Never before had assassins received such advanced billing. It should have been enough to deter all but the wildest publicity hounds among them. The national media were filled with accounts of FBI agents fanning out across the country to hunt the assassins and heavily armed security teams roosting on the White House roof. In addition, there was film footage of Libyan soldiers, quote unquote, firing missile launchers to shoot down helicopters, quote, such as the one the president used, end quote. Police composite sketches of 6 would be assassins, looking like sinister comic book third world characters, were carried by newspapers across the country, including the Washington Post and the New York Times, and flashed repeatedly across the TV screen. The sketches were allegedly composed from descriptions provided by an unidentified informant who somehow was privy to the whole plot and endowed with an exceptional memory for facial detail, sorry. They were distributed to the media by they were distributed by to the media by columnist Jack Anderson, who later regretted doing it and wrote that he had been set up by an unnamed intelligence agency. Oh God. Jack, Jack, Jack. Needless to say, the non existent hit teams never materialized. It remained for a TV guide on June 12th, 1986, to admit in a cover story entitled, quote, Why American TV is So Vulnerable to Foreign Propaganda, end quote, and that the quote unquote assassination plot consisted of nothing but wild conjectures. TV Guide then disinformed its millions of readers by asserting that the whole incident was probable evidence of KGB campaign to use alarmist rumors to quote unquote destabilize public opinion in the West. Or perhaps the story was planted by Gaddafi himself, who is quote unquote is no madman, but a quote unquote shrewd Bedouin who is sitting back and laughing over this. The TV guide accused Gaddafi of deliberately planning stories that implicated him in assassination plots against the President of the United States, presumably so that he might give U.S. leaders an excuse to deliver another murderous military retaliation upon him and his country. In our open society, continues TV Guide, where anything can get reported, the press should be more wary of these false stories floated by quote unquote Soviet intelligence sources. This assertion was as outlandish as the original story itself, ignored the fact that assassination team fairy tale emanated from the White House rather than from any foreign source. Indeed, the press had been once again willingly duped by Washington, not Moscow. The White House learned some things after it floated the assassination plot story of 1981. In regard to the Pan Am bombing, it came up with the names of two specific Libyan agents, Abdel Basset Ali Armergi, Megrahi, I'm sorry, Megrahi, and Lehman Khalifa Fima, so that no embarrassment would be suffered when imaginary assassins fail to materialize. The White House also learned that it can inflict more durable pain and punishment with economic sanctions than with a few airstrikes. So Libya has been repeatedly hit with trade sanctions. Now, just to kind of bolster this, um, I want you guys to go back in your memory banks for a second. Hmm. Remember Back to the Future? The movie, yes, Back to the Future. Okay. In the beginning of the first movie, Back to the Future, um, what was part of the plot that caused Marty McFly to go back to 1955? Wasn't it that there were Libyan terrorists, right, that were trying to get Doc Brown to build them a nuclear bomb? According to the story, according to the movie, and instead he gave them a box filled with uh, used pinball machine parts instead, and um, he put the plutonium for him for his DeLorean. And then who comes in basically a Volkswagen van? Well, he was like, the Libyans, right? So basically, the whole plot of making Libyans look like terrorists, that was even in movies. Even in movies, the Libyan terrorist propaganda in some of our time honored movies that we love was in there too. And so the question begs, and it's going to get to it in the book, as to why in the world would people like Gaddafi and Libyans at large be, plastered with this terrorist type of, this terrorist type of veneer by the West, especially by the United States in general? Well, let's go. Here's why. Gaddafi's real sins. Still, we might ask what motivates all this hostility against Libya. Excuse me. Why has a country of 3 million inhabitants with a ragtag army of 55,000 been singled out by US leaders and media as a major threat to US national security? And why is Libya still a target today with oil and trade embargoes? Is it because US policy is just stupid or mean? More likely, the attacks have been motivated by Washington's concern that Libya was one of those renegade countries that refuse client state status, not unlike Nicaragua under the Sandinistas, Islamic Iran, nationalist Iraq, and communist Cuba and North Korea, also known as DPRK. There are countries that do not want to be integrated part of the global free market system. They do not want to open their land, labor, markets, and natural resources to U.S. investors, saying in effect, "Come on in, it's all yours." There is no occupational safety laws, no corporate taxes, no environmental standards, no limit to what you can carve out of our land at outrageously low prices. No minimum wage, no real labor unions. And if the workers or peasants get out of line, our police and military, who are trained and equipped by your military, will take care of them. For there are no constitutional protections either. You can give us oligarchs a generous cut, and the rest is all yours. You can make this society safe for us, and we'll open it to completely to you. These nations that refuse this contract with America run the risk of being targeted as terrorist states. After Gaddafi took power in the 1969 Colonel's Rebellion, he nationalized Libya's oil industry and set about transforming a country that resembled Saudi Arabia in a more egalitarian society, using a larger portion of its capital and labor for popular needs rather than corporate profits, building health clinics, schools, and public housing, and implementing massive restoration programs. Independent, reform minded third world leaders like Gaddafi have a chancy future in this new world order. They do not have the right politics. They do not represent the right class interests. For that reason, we, the American people, ought to get to know more about what they are doing and find out how we too can produce leaders who do not worship at the altar of global free market corporate capitalism. Dangerous leaders who put public need before private greed. Now, just to show you guys a little bit of what um, what he was talking about, what Parenti was talking about, just so you guys can see. This is a graphic that talks about Muammar Gaddafi. It says Muammar Gaddafi demonized by the West, but here are the facts about Libya under Gaddafi. Number one, free healthcare. Two, free electricity. Can you imagine not having an electric bill? Can you imagine not having? Lord, I need to take a drink for this one. Mm, mm, mm. Look, I'm gonna do the math right now because you would literally save thousands a year if you did not have to pay for electricity. I mean, yeah, just me alone, that'd be $2,000 a year, over $2,000 a year. I'd be saving on, that I wouldn't have to pay if I had free electricity. Okay, that's amazing. Interest-free loans. So you get a loan, you pay back the loan exactly what you got. Interest-free loans. Newlyweds received $50,000 to find a home. Crazy, right? 50,000. Let's say your home is. Let's say you find a home that's $200,000, right? That's not out of the realm of possibility here in the United States. $200,000 to find a home, and then you get $50,000, to get a home, which means that you only have to spend, the rest of the balance. That shaves off also a few years off of your mortgage because you now have $50,000, that's been shaved off of it. You see, mothers receive $5,000 on birth of a child. So as soon as you have a kid, boom, you get a check for $5,000. Wouldn't that help with brand new parents, right? A lot of us, especially a lot of us millennials and now Gen Z, we're not having kids. Why? Because it's too expensive. But if the government just gave us a check, when as soon as we had a kid, well, that whole fear of not being able to raise a child, it kind of goes down. So now we don't have to pay. We don't have to pay for healthcare. So even when you have your kid, it's free. You don't have to pay for electricity. So you can put on some Yo Gabba Gabba, in front of your kid and not have to worry about it. I know I'm showing my age. And then if you needed a loan, you can get an interest-free loan, right? You just got married, so now you have $50,000 that contributed to your home. And let's say your home was $100,000, you basically got your home 50% off. Or if your home was cheaper than that, which I highly doubt, can't even find a good home, well built home for $100,000 these days. But anyways, so yeah, and then on top of that, as soon as you have a kid, as soon as you pop out a kid, $5,000. Then on top of that, citizens receive a percentage of all oil sales, and petrol was 14 cents per liter. Now, I think that liter was that's a metric liter. So what is actually, you know what? Let me do this in real time. Um, let's look at it. Liter to gallon.
1 liter is 0.264 liquid gallons.
Oh, okay. So it's basically a quarter. So that'd be 14 times 4. 14 and 14 is 28. 28 and 28 is 56. So you mean to tell me that's 56 cents per gallon? 56 cents per gallon. 56 cents per gallon. Look, let. What if your gas was $1 per gallon right now? Let's double it. $1 per gallon. Y'all would we everybody would be flipping out. That gas station would have it would be sold out. It would be sold out, right? Then it says government paid 50% of the price of your car. Then unemployed Libyans receive the average salary for their profession and benefits. That's why they wanted to get at Gaddafi. My goodness. I'm gonna keep that up while I'm talking, while I'm still reading this, just so that this is it just solidifies a little bit more of the point as I'm reading. Meanwhile, we are not likely to see a swift end to terrorism hype. Indeed, in 1995, President Clinton sponsored the gosh, I can't do this. Omnibus Counterterrorism Act, which the U.S. Senate passed by vote of 91 to 8. Among other things, a bill authorized the president to unilaterally designate as quote unquote terrorist any group anywhere in the world without offering a shred of evidence. Well, who voted? Who voted for that? I should have looked this up when I was reading it earlier. Omnibus Counterterrorism Act of 1995. I wonder who voted for it. I wonder if I can find that really quick. Uh, I have it right in front of me, but I want to know who voted for it. Let me see. Uh, who for? Let's see. It was sponsored by Senator Joe Biden. Are you surprised? I'm not. I'm not. It was sponsored by Senator Joe Biden. Oh my gosh. So, why is it that a president can declare anyone a terrorist for no reason at all, no substantial reason, and not even need to give a reason for anybody who's a terrorist? Joe Biden's the reason why. So, President Clinton sponsored the Omnibus Counterterrorism Act, which the U.S. Senate passed by a vote of 91 to 8. Among other things, the bill authorized the president to unilaterally designate as "quote unquote" terrorist any group anywhere in the world without offering a shred of evidence. Any challenge to the president's declaration would have been a criminal offense. Any donation of money or aid or any kind of support to the "quote unquote" terrorist group would have been punishable with 10 years in prison and a $50,000 fine. The bill would also have allowed the FBI to infiltrate, wiretap, and investigate groups and individuals with no previous proof of criminal activity. Footnote reads: the bill was voted down in the House of Representatives in December 1995 by a coalition of civil liberties minded Democrats and conservative Republicans, the latter concerned that the bill would infringe upon the rights of ultra rightist groups in the gun lobby. End quote. That's right. Back to the paragraph. With the overthrow of most communist states, the U.S. leaders face a shortage of adversaries needed to justify U.S. global interventionism. "Quote unquote" fighting terrorism now takes the place of "quote unquote" fighting communism as the rationale for a huge military state and a repressive national security apparatus at home and abroad. The true function of which is to keep the world safe for those whom own it. The real danger we face is not from terrorism, but from what is being done under the pretext of fighting it. And that is all she wrote. So that is the terrorism hype, chapter 1, part 6 of Dirty Truths with Michael Parenti. The next one we're going to be reading is Free Speech at a Price, and that starts on page 82. So this is interesting. Like, holy crap. I'm still looking for who voted for this. Let me take a look here because I'm actually quite curious as to uh I'm curious as to people who voted for it because some of these people are still alive and still on, in our government. So Joe Biden, um he's the one that introduced it. But sometimes what they'll do, uh you see, yays 90, nays 7 not voting, Okay. So, of course, Senator Graham from Florida, he was a yay. Um, I'm looking at people who Murkowski was a yay. Let me see. Of course, you would see a Rockefeller say yay. Let me see. Strom Thurmond said yay. Yeah, of course he did. Shelby said yeah. Let me see. Of course, Joe Lieberman said yeah. Oh my gosh. Chuck Grassley, yes. People who I know that are still alive and still in government. Um, of course, Chris Dodd said yeah. Feingold said yeah. Wow. Barbara Boxer said yes too. It's just crazy. So yeah, I mean, this is basically like who voted for this, you know. Yeah. So it's just crazy how um actually let me show you guys who voted for that. Share screen. So this omnibus bill that gave the president that much power, these are the people who literally voted for it. Um actually let me enlarge this so that everybody can see, and let me put it up here so you guys can see that too. So yeah, these are the people who actually voted for it that Michael Parenti was talking about in his book. And of course, Ashcroft. Yeah, he didn't vote for it. And the funny part is, it's like all these people said yes. They said yes. It's crazy. Wait, Patrick Leahy said yes from Vermont. It just goes to show that really it's all one party. And it's been all one party for a long, 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 long time. And Michael Parenti even talked about it in his book. So I just it is this stuff is so interesting because you realize that the setup has been there for quite a long time. The setup for to make it that the government acts in a unilateral fashion. When it comes to our rights and wanting to strip it away, they've been doing that for quite some time now. Mm. So, and on top of that, all the things that they basically tried to do against Gaddafi. Think about all the things that they tried to do against Castro. And it makes you wonder about the people who is labeled as a terrorist dictator across the world by the United States. It makes you wonder, like, are they really a terrorist dictator now? Because you see what the United States has done when you have people like Gaddafi that are literally, you know, uh, making it so that the people are uplifted by, and they're doing nationalization of things like the you know oil and oil industry. Now you start to think about, what about the DPRK? Like, what about Venezuela? You know, what about in Cuba? Because people are like, oh my God, these guys are dictators. It's like looking at the way the United States treats its people. I don't know if the United States can actually have they have room to say anything. Do we even have a democracy? Because that's really under question. That's been under question for quite some time now. And we see how the Democrats, they honestly, they do election interference within their own primaries. They don't allow the true democratic process to take place. On top of that, we actually see an example with Matthew Ho. They're making sure that third parties are not on the ballot, right? Why aren't they make sure they're not on the ballot? I thought that democracy was the primary focus, but they're saying, "Oh, we must beat Republicans." It's not to beat Republicans. They're working with Republicans. They just don't want somebody else to come in and ruin their gravy train that they have along with the Republicans. That's exactly what it is. And so we're finding out now that really, I mean, if both parties are working in tandem with each other to push the country more right wing, and they're subduing democracy or subverting democracy of any other third party or independent from coming in, do we have a democracy? If all this is going on, do we have democracy? See, the scary part is, as I read this book, it's like the point that we are living in fascism now, it's already been solidified by Parenti, but now with the points that he's making, he's nailing that point down. So much so to the point where it's like, I get it. I really, really get it. So, look, I'm just telling y'all, you know, just like what, you know, Sabby Sabs had on, you know, Chris Hedges. Ooh, excuse me. She had on Chris Hedges, and a lot of us are now looking at, if you are going to vote third party, but really that is a minuscule part of what needs to be done. Direct action, feet in the streets, uplifting your neighbors, and because something's going to happen. Something has to happen because you look at what's going on right now. I'm not even going to mention the country, but there's a proxy war going on right now in Europe. And the United States is really, through the tool of NATO, trying to basically, take over the world. And there are some uh, actors, as far as heads of state, that are saying, no, you don't. And the United States is labeling them as terrorists when pot me kettle. So yeah, so this was actually a really good read. I can't wait to continue even further. This has been a great book, and I'm glad I chose this book. And it was really by the title. I was just like, "Dirty Truths." This is interesting, and so I hope to. I'm gonna try to put out the next part, you know, earlier so that number one, I can catch up, and number two, this is it's deep, very deep. So also, the next part of Blood in My Eye by George Jackson is already up on Rockfin. You guys want to give that a look, you guys go ahead and do that. Also, stay tuned for me, for the Savvy and JB show later this evening. If you're watching this today on Thursday, then we'll be having a fun show tonight. And stay tuned for me on the JB show on this Sunday. So it'll be a great conversation, and I hope to. Oh, and next week, I'm going to say this now, before, so I won't forget. But I'm also going to be having surgery in the next week, so that's going to put me out of commission for a couple days. So if you guys are curious as to anything, it's just I had surgery. So if you guys, so next week I'll be doing that. So yeah, but I just want to thank you all for watching today. And hopefully, you guys can, come back for another reading soon. And I can't wait to get back into it. Thanks again to all the patrons on Patreon as well as on Coffee. For without you guys, I do not have a show. And thank you so much for watching. Forehead kisses and read them if you got them. Butterfly in the sky. I can go twice as high. Take a look. It's in a book called Reading Rainbow.